When you follow a struggling team, it is sometimes hard to find light at the end of a dark tunnel. However, there is always some genuine excitement around the time of the AFL Draft. Passionate supporters devote a disproportionate amount of time reading about the country's most talented young prospects as they ponder which teenage footballer could potentially change the future trajectory of their club. Believe me, as a Tiger supporter, I've been there. But I was wondering, just which junior has entered the system with the biggest raps ever? Who are the AFL's versions of LeBron James and Zion Williamson? Look how excited the New Orleans Pelican staff were when they discovered that they won the lottery for the first overall selection in the NBA draft.
Grizzlies.
I'm Jackson from Off the Play, and here are the most hyped AFL draft selections of all time. I will start off by nominating Bryce Gibbs from the 2006 AFL Draft. During his draft year, he had a 37 disposal, 6-goal game in the Sandful Seniors for Glenelg. Seriously impressive numbers for a 17-year-old, and he ended up finishing third in the Tigers' best and fairest. The last encounter between that year's cellar dwellers, Carlton and Essendon, before the draft was dubbed the Bryce Gibbs Cup. Gibbs was even named in the Blues' leadership group at the beginning of his very first season, despite yet playing an AFL game, the first time in history this has ever happened. Crazy. Although not technically drafted due to being zoned to Brisbane via the Northern Territory, Nathan Buckley entered the AFL system with some huge raps behind him. In his final year before joining the Bears, Buckley dominated a Sandful season in the famous prison bar jumper of Port Adelaide. In that 1992 season, Buckley won the McGarry, the Jack Odie medal, as well as Port Adelaide's best and fairest, and was a member of their premiership winning team. I think it's fair to say that he lived up to the expectations. In a similar boat of players who were not really drafted, Jager O'Meara had insane hype about him before he entered an AFL list, and Jack Martin was another one in that category. The Western Australian pair were picked up by the Gold Coast Suns, but both find themselves at Victorian clubs as of 2021. Des Headland was an incredibly talented junior when selected with the first overall pick by the Brisbane Lions in the 1998 draft. Just look how happy the Western Australian was at packing up to head across to the other side of the country. Headland was able to play in the flag at the Lions and eventually finished his career back in Perth at Fremantle. A young, shaggy, blonde-haired Adam Cooney had huge raps as a junior over in South Australia, and to date is the only number 1 draft pick to have won a Brownlow medal. A man touted as a potential future Brownlow medalist, Matt Rao, was another who was considered a certainty to be snapped up with the first selection from months before the draft. And when you average 32 possessions and 9 tackles per game in the NAB League, and absolutely tear apart that year's grand final, it's pretty easy to see why. That's not to mention the fact that he's the type of guy that every dad wants their daughter to date, and that he lives and breathes football. Brett Deletio was earmarked as the number 1 pick about 3 or 4 years out. He was apparently best on ground on senior debut in the strong Goulburn Valley Football League for Kai Abram as a 15-year-old. Lids had huge raps on him and had to make the much publicised choice between footy over cricket. As a Tiger, I'm glad he chose the footy. Jack Watts was super highly rated, especially given the fact that he was selected in front of Nick Natanui, who also deserves a spot on this list given his pre-draft highlights for Swan Districts and how well he tested at the AFL draft camp. A ruckman that had second efforts and tackling pressure of a small forward. We had hardly seen that in our game before. As for Watts, obviously his career has already been spoken about plenty of times before, but he was a super talented kid. Dominated at Brighton Grammar and was impressive for Vic Metro at that year's national championships. He ran a not too shabby time of 2.82 in the 20-metre sprint as well, and at 196 centimetres, it was easy to see why the Demons were so desperate to snap him up. Now I've probably missed a whole bunch here. David Swallow was touted as the best thing since sliced bread before he was picked up by the Suns. Athletic ruckman Jeff White starred for the Dandenong Stingrays before being selected at number 1 by Fremantle, while the following year Clive Waterhouse was another highly rated talent. But I'd love to hear your opinion. So please let us know in the comments which players would be your nomination. I'd absolutely love a like and subscribe, and thanks very much for watching.